Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
All right, let's go for it. We'll have John go then.
We are in 2020 is fucked, right? Like 2020 is not the best year for almost anybody. And the tendency when there's this much uncertainty and adversity is to hunker down and go into survival mode. And this has made me reflect a lot about timing and surviving, thriving, and failing. Last summer, my family, my wife, and 3 children, 3, 5, and 14 at the time, went to Yellowstone. And of course, you wouldn't go to Yellowstone and not see Old Faithful. We arrived at Old Faithful on a blazing hot June afternoon, and there were gaggles and gaggles of people around. We got there about 3 minutes before the eruption, and it was great, but we didn't have a very good vantage point. So we decided to wait for the 15 or 20 minutes or so, which is the amount of time that tends to elapse between eruptions. My 3-year-old became very antsy waiting, and so there's a boardwalk of sorts around the geyser. It's very unsafe to walk on the ground because there are really thin sheets of rock that you can step through, and that can be fatal or life-threatening or very, very painful because of all the geologic whatever activity that takes place right below the surface. So we were walking along the boardwalk, and we left my wife, Sarah, and my then 5-year-old son, Lewis, behind. So only after the eruption would I learn what took place during that intervening time when I was watching with my daughter. They sat on the other side of the glacier watching steam gently rise. And when there were about 3 minutes until the next eruption, Lewis announced, as children do at the worst possible times consistently, he announced that he had to go to the bathroom. So Sarah was like, "Can you hold it?" Of course, the first question that you'd ask, and he said no. Well, it was busy. There were people around that heard this conversation, and some of them were parents and some of them weren't, but they were like, "Oh, just let him go under a tree." They were supportive. So Sarah looked at Lewis and said, "Lewis is at number 1. And he looked at her. Little boy with bleached blonde hair and expressive brown eyes looked up at her and just shook his head no. And everybody around them moaned. So while I was watching Old Faithful erupt from a very good vantage point with my 3-year-old, Sarah was in a toilet stall with a 5-year-old. And when I think about this as a timing analogy, I think that for every idea that's failed because of bad timing, there are at least 2 great ideas that failed because the person who could have actualized them waited for perfect timing or for what he or she perceived as good timing. I have to remind myself of this at this time when we're in this rotten situation that is going to drag on indefinitely, potentially into 2022, and try to maintain a growth mindset. Because if you hunker down and go into survival mode, I think that you're going to end up feeling like you've been stuck in a toilet stall.
Okay. Thank you, John. Nicely done. All right. So we've got 3 minutes. What are some things that were great? Let's try to rapid fire this so we can get through some of this stuff. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, really fast. I love dangles and gaggles. That was very visual. The steam gently rising was awesome. And then I love the lesson at the end as the metaphor and how you applied it to yourself and how it's a lesson to everybody going forward.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
What
I loved
else?
it. It was great.
Go ahead, Milo.
So I think that was an amazing story, really amazing. I think it's probably the most genuine that you've come off that I've seen you yet, because it was just you talking about what happened with your kids. So I imagine that's what it was. It really communicated well. There was a lot of empathy, and I extremely am impressed with how you applied that situation to the current broader situation. In fact, I wanted to say thank you because I almost needed to hear those words myself. What I would say is that obviously a second go, you'd have more of a space to kind of understand where you're going with the story. But at the same time, I feel like taking that away, taking those pauses away almost takes away from our interest, because it sounded like a story you're telling someone for a reason. Like you're having a conversation, they brought something up and you're like, wait, I got to tell you about this experience I had. And you're putting it in your head together. So it worked extremely well that way. I honestly don't really have anything negative to say about it. I just wanted to compliment you that was an amazing, completely disjoint topics tied together in a timely fashion. Well said. Well done.
Thanks, Milo.
When we teach storytelling to scientists and lecturers and people who have lots of data that they need to communicate, we often lean into the fact that you can use a story as metaphor to illustrate a broader concept. And I think you did that beautifully here. You used a very human experience that we can all relate to, going to the bathroom, 5-year-olds having kids and trying to navigate summer vacation in Yellowstone and the chaos of it all. And brought it back to, okay, but this is the bigger lesson, and this is how it applies to this more cerebral, more conceptual thing. And I think that is a skill that is extremely hard to develop, and you demonstrated it very well. So congrats. Go ahead.
I just want to say that since the dawn of mankind, and I am absolutely sure there's a tally somewhere, because you have successfully incorporated poop into your story, it is universal. And so I think we may have another conversation about this, but I just want to make that observation.
Yeah, just ask the creators of South Park.
That's right. All right. What about things to experiment with? Go ahead, Sarah.
That is such an exceptional story, John. It would be great for you to practice it in the way that Stephanie said, to actually talk it and listen to your record and stuff, because it's awesome. You could be a keynote speaker opening with that one.
Thanks, Sarah.
Great. Mm-hmm.
I really liked your use of foreshadow. The fact that you described that you were out with your other kid, and so therefore you missed what happened, and it wasn't until later that you discovered. And so we're all kind of like, oh, what did you discover? Right? There's it's a very good use of invite curiosity. The opportunity would be to tighten all of the details around why you need a boardwalk. I actually don't need that for the story. And actually, if you said we'd been walking on the boardwalk, I would have just accepted that and moved on. And I don't need to know about the layer of rock and the peril that is at play. Unless
I disagree.
The peril comes in. But the peril never comes into your story, which is why I don't care about it. Milo, go ahead. Say.
I disagree, because that was a red herring, and I thought that's where the story was going to go. So he had me on the edge of my seat, wondering how his kid was going to run across the rim of the geyser before it goes off. But it never happened, and the story took a direction that totally took my attention away. So I even forgot about it until you had just mentioned it. So I'm just on the other side here.
All right. This is why we have multiple audience members. Go ahead, Pablo.
Yeah, if I compare to the last time I heard you, John, I feel that you're so present in your storytelling that it becomes so compelling and so beautifully told that, it's just an amazing and beautiful way that you did it, when you actually are totally present and very emotional, and the story and everything was just really well said. Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo.
I'd add one more, John, as something to think about. And I don't know that this will make your story better, but it's worth experimenting with. You do a great job with your visual details. Super great job with your visual and your sensory details. Like, I get a lot of what it looks and feels and smells and sounds like. What I don't get is what it feels like. And I think that is an opportunity for you to, describe not only what is coming at you from the outside, but what is coming at you from the inside. What are you feeling in your hands, in your hair, in your, it's like, what is your body experiencing, so that I can start to understand the emotional side of the story.
Thanks, Stephanie.
As always, Story Hour is my favorite hour of the week. Please come back again.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.